Tim, what do you make of this news about Matthew Calamari Jr. testifying today?
Well, it's an incremental development, Lawrence, but I think it's significant in that it shows that the Manhattan DA is going down and up the food chain at the Trump organization to gather information and to gather testimony and to apply pressure to anyone in the Trump organization who might have knowledge of illegalities there. If what the Calamaris were asked about was consistent with everything else that the Manhattan District Attorney has been probing, it was probably about whether or not they got undeclared compensation in the form of freebies like apartments and automobiles that weren't properly declared to the IRS. The consequence of that will matter, because if the Calamaris are exposed, then it turns them into potential witnesses against others in the Trump organization, including Donald Trump himself. It also continues the question of whether or not the Trump children will be called to testify in the same set of issues, and anyone else in the Trump organization, including Jeff McConney, and as we know already, Alan Weisselberg. And all of them have to be looking at what Alan Weisselberg is looking at, which is the possibility of a severe prison sentence if this goes in as bad as a direction as it might, which of course it might not. I think the other thing to remember when it comes to the Calamaris themselves is Donald Trump hired Matthew Calamari because he saw him beating up two people at the US Open and hired him as a bodyguard. And then years along the way, he got transformed into Donald Trump's chief operating officer. And it's a reminder of how cartoonish and comically absurd the Trump organization is as an entity. This person who was elected because of his supposed business prowess was hiring people willy-nilly for roles that were far above their experience or expertise, but he didn't really care. And it was a mirror of what he later did in the White House, I think.
Well, I mean, isn't that just a title, chief operating officer? Isn't that, I mean, Donald Trump's the chief operating officer, along with the kids, presumably. And that title was just there to give away to someone who wasn't named Trump.
100%. And remember, this was essentially a mom and pop operation. This wasn't a large, sophisticated Fortune 500 company. This was a small group of people intensely loyal to Donald Trump. And at the end of the day, 2 or 3 people there called all of the shots, and none of them did anything of significance without Donald Trump signing off on it.
Now, Jeff McConney, if I have him placed correctly, he is in the financial structure of the operation. Is he the kind of guy who would be in the room with Alan Weisselberg a lot?
Well, he's the kind of guy who helped the Trumps prepare their tax returns. And he's the kind of guy who has knowledge of what the scope of their business really looked like, who some of their financial partners were, how they structured deals on paper. I think at the end of the day, it was really Alan Weisselberg and Donald Trump and maybe 1 or 2 other people that had deciding roles in all this. And I don't think that Jeff McConney was always there, but he was certainly there frequently enough that he's a very material witness, and he's somebody whose testimony can be really damaging and threatening to Donald Trump.
There's something that's always been fascinating about this investigation, and that is that the district attorney is leaving office basically at the end of the year, which is unusual in these kinds of investigations. And so we've all had this time frame of thinking what's going to happen will happen within this calendar year, at least get started in a serious way. And so that's why every time there's a witness going in, the news media thinks we're closer and closer to that point of what happens next.
Well, but I think that might be an artificial time frame, Lawrence, because Cy Vance Jr. has put in a very sophisticated team of investigators. They are being methodical, as they should be. I think they're trying to build a bulletproof case, as they should. And I think he's very cognizant of the fact that there's a likelihood that this case will run past his time as DA, which I think it most likely will. And I think that's a good thing. may not happen quickly enough to satisfy everyone's appetite for quick justice, but I do think it's an indicator of the kind of formidable investigative team he's put in place.